the IDF identified Hezbollah terrorist organization preparing to fire missiles, rockets towards Israeli territory. In a self-defense act to remove these threats, the IDF is striking terror targets in Lebanon from which Hezbollah was planning to launch their attacks on Israeli civilians.
In the early morning hours of Sunday, Israel launched a large-scale, what they call preemptive strike into southern Lebanon, into the Hezbollah, to destroy what they claim was hundreds, and actually more than 1,000 rocket launchers that were preparing to attack into Israel. In response, the Hezbollah side fired back several hundred, apparently, drones and rockets into 11 different bases in Israel. Now, what we know so far is that as of right now, as of this morning on Sunday, both sides have said that they have done what they want to do and that this is not going to escalate further. And of course, the tensions have been just sky high since Israel has conducted a series of high-profile assassinations against Hezbollah, against targets in Iran, and certainly against Hezbollah, Hamas leaders in terms of their war that they've got going on there. So lots of things moving around here. I want to talk to you a little bit about what we know so far. Some of the concern was that, as we've been talking for a while now, that there's a possibility of Iran actually launching a strike into Israel in retaliation for the assassination of Hania, the Israeli Hamas negotiator, back in July. And so far, that has still not happened. But now then this one, because of the Israeli assassination 40 days ago of Fouad Shakir, one of the senior Hezbollah commanders in Beirut, this was kind of expected, because at the end of the 40 days mourning period, very often in the Muslim faith, that's when they will launch some sort of retaliation, whether it's a war or just a personal issue. So that's what was prepared. So it's not like probably Israel was just looking around. They saw a bunch of launchers and sent something to strike into it. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But here, actually, while we're talking here, these are some of the strikes that you see. This is some of the images coming out from this morning. Now, what we're probably seeing here, and we probably will have Ted Postel on later this week to talk about it, but this looks like some Iron Dome intercepts of some of the Hezbollah rockets that were coming out. These appear to be Hezbollah coming into Israel, not the other way around. I think there's going to be some scenes of that shortly with some of the Israeli ones that were actually landing in there. We'll see how that works out in just a second. But I want to tell you a little bit about what we do know. This is what's being reported so far, is that the IDF says that they detected that there were some large-scale preparations for an attack against Israel. And so they recognized it, and they apparently somehow knew it was going to be launched at 5 a.m. Israel claimed that this was in response to an attack that they detected that was coming. Somehow they knew that it was supposed to be initiated at 5 a.m. And so it says that they launched a preemptive strike at 30 minutes before that to preempt any of this attack. And according to what Israel claims, that they launched over a 100 jet foray into southern Lebanon. Now, I'll just tell you that I'm skeptical of that claim that it was a target of opportunity. I've certainly been in combat operations. I've trained for them, and I know what it means when you have a target of opportunity and how you launch strikes against that. But when you launch a 100 jet strike, folks, that takes a lot of preparation. So it seems unlikely that this was the case. It seems like more than likely. And actually, I remember seeing it in yesterday's news on Saturday that Israel was prepared for it because they knew that the 40-day calendar was about to expire. And so that they were prepared for something that happened. So I doubt very seriously that this was suddenly that they discovered, although Hezbollah was probably going to do something. In fact, the fact that they did so shortly after that implies that they too were ready. So I think that it was a case where both sides knew something was coming and they ended up launching. Let me show you. This is what is being reported as to where a lot of these strikes came from. So you see these. This is the northern part of Israel, and that kind of pink line you see there in the middle, that is the a 5-kilometer strip into southern Lebanon where a lot of the Hezbollah fighters are. And at least according to Israeli media, that's where all of the strikes were carried out. So it was not a broad scale thing. It's not something that's designed to potentially escalate the war. but to hit military targets that are in range of Israeli positions in the north. Now, these red dots that you see in there, this is the 11 areas that Hezbollah fired, as you see in the graphic there, 320 rockets and drones at the 11 military bases. At this point, we don't have any reporting from either side of what those 300 rockets did. Were they all intercepted? Did any of them get through? We don't have that yet. As soon as we do, we'll certainly bring it to you. But I want to talk about what the significance of this may be and what the concerns are. Because if we've been worried about Iran doing something in response to the assassination in its capital at the end of July, then we still have something to come. And this, at least, there was some concern that this one was actually, this attack by Hezbollah was going to be in coordination with something from Iran. That doesn't appear to have happened. So it doesn't look like Iran did anything in this one. So that is still something that's out there. But now we also have to look at the claims that both sides are making and then the overall situation. Both, it's interesting actually, both Israel and Hezbollah have both said that this concludes today's broadcasting, so to speak. They said that this is not going to escalate into a war. Both sides keep saying they don't want a war. They don't want this to escalate into a war, which is very interesting because the scale of these attacks keeps going up. Now, folks, this has been going on literally since October, shortly after the terrorist attempt happened and Israel started moving into northern Gaza. So this kind of tit for tat thing has been going on just really all throughout the course of this war. But it's been relatively small scale. It's been relatively contained. Israel has been recently expanding some of their target list to go further into Lebanon. They've now assassinated a number of people in Beirut, taking out high-profile leaders. And now then you see this one here was, as far as I understand, the largest scale operation that they've had to date. 100 jets. I can't emphasize how big of a strike that is. Israel claimed that they destroyed 1,000 rocket launchers. I'm skeptical of that as well, because it's not likely that Hezbollah is going to actually expose that many at one time, and that Israel would have such precise targeting location that they could take them out in a single swoop. But I'm sure they got something. I mean, some of the scenes from Lebanon show some significant explosions. So we'll wait and see as the fog of war clears, and as we get through the day, we'll probably find more and more battle damage assessment. We can give you a better issue, a better accounting probably on Monday. But we have to look at the bigger issue here. Where is this going? When you use military force, you're supposed to have some idea what you want to accomplish. You want to do this in order that something, right? So you don't just use military force because you have it. But it actually kind of seems like that's where the sides are right now. Because simultaneous with this, you have the United States desperately trying to get the Israeli and the Hamas side to go to a ceasefire so that they can get the central core issue of all of this. So it's all these attacks from Hezbollah, all the attacks from the Houthis in the Red Sea are all claimed to be directly correlated with Israel's attack into Hamas area, into the Gaza Strip. And the thinking being, at least from Washington, is that we get this first one off the table, then we take away the cost for the other one, and then we can bring some stability. Maybe that can happen. There's some plausibility to that. I'm certainly all for anything that's going to lower the temperature and lower the risk of escalation. Unfortunately, Benjamin Netanyahu is not very interested in a ceasefire, and even as of reporting this very morning, he is continuing to say he's not interested in reaching a negotiated settlement unless it's completely on his terms. And he said they have a certain level of things that they want, and so far he is unwilling to compromise on any of his key issues. And so the war will continue on. There will be no ceasefire. America will continue to be frustrated, and these kinds of things will continue to percolate and boil. And here's the thing you need to know. As I told you, these kind of tit-for-tat things between southern Lebanon and Hezbollah and Israel have been going on since October of last year, but this represents another escalation. And while both sides say that they want to end the war and they don't want to go to a big war, yet both sides keep using these attacks. Because had Israel not used its preemptive stuff, by all evidence, Hezbollah would have launched this 320 rocket and drone strike anyway. So that's also much bigger than their normal. So you see that both sides claim they don't want war, yet both sides are escalating. Now, scholars in the area and people who track this a lot are saying, as of this morning, that they are worried that this is going to continue to be just the next step in some kind of big explosion. because at one point, one of the sides is going to strike something that's too sensitive for the other side. And then you have this potential for this, beginning this going up the escalation ladder and response and counter response, and then it gets out of control. And every time we have one of these things, every time this war continues on, that risk will continue to grow. So the question for the United States is, are we ever going to use some of our leverage to really knuckle down and tell Netanyahu, whether you like it or not, you're going to have some kind of compromise here. You're going to have to give in on something you don't want. That's just the nature of negotiations. No negotiations ever happen to where one side says, here's my terms, and then the other side just says, yes, sir, and they do it. It's just not how it works. The only time that works is when there is a full-scale war or a declaration of you've lost, here are the terms of surrender. That's what that is. And that's not what the case is, because both sides still have the ability to fight. So the United States is going to have to put some diplomatic pressure on Israel, meaning they'll have to be willing to use some leverage, which would be very unpopular in a presidential campaign, especially because you can be sure that Israeli friends would do everything they can to wail and scream about that and talk about how it's, oh, the administration doesn't have their back, et cetera. I mean, it happens all the time. It's a normal playbook. But if the administration is not willing to face that kind of heat politically, then the chances that this escalates and finally explodes will continue to fester and rise. And we're seeing it right before our eyes. The threat is rising. The scale of the attacks is rising. And at one point, something may happen that goes beyond it. And again, we're still waiting to see what Iran is going to do. Hezbollah waited the 40 days for their strike here. We don't know if Iran is going to do that. Sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. But they always do something in response. And of course, I'm sure that they're still trying to figure out exactly what they want to do that's big enough to show that they try to reestablish deterrence in their terms, but not big enough to get a war, which they also don't want. That's the interesting thing here, and the perverse thing. All the parties say they don't want war, and yet all the parties keep going down a road that's going to lead to war. And it's time for somebody to be the adult in the room to finally start doing something that says, hey, we have the leverage, we have the wherewithal, and we have the capacity to try and bring some sanity into this, and to really, even if we need to compel even our friends, to use Netanyahu's words in a different context, this is what is going to have to happen so that we don't have war. Give in on something you don't want right now so that you can at least get the impetus for more war, which you claim not to want, Israel, off the table, so that over time, with diplomacy and political negotiations, etc., you can eliminate the possibility for war over time. Now, there are huge barriers to that, and I don't in any way mean to undermine them, but what I'm telling you emphatically is that you've got to get to step one if you even have a shot at step 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., getting into stability over time. That's what is needed right here, and we're going to stay on this breaking situation for you. Talk to you soon.